So this is a jump back to the Redpill thought splurge that I had earlier. I've had troubles uploading it, so I'm just gonna repeat most of it now. So in summary, the film is interesting. Everyone should see the film if they are interested in gender equality in any form whatsoever. My experience as a panellist was also interesting. It's the first time I've done anything like that, and I learned a lot. I think from the experience I learned a lot in terms of public speaking and what I'm capable of, and I also learned a lot about the subject matter. I want to make sure that you understand this isn't a review of the film, it's my thoughts about having been a panel member. There will be a blog to follow, which you can read if you want. Some of the things that really stood out for me were some of the panellists, some of my co-panellists. I was joined by some really interesting men and women, including Katie John Went, a Norwich-based gender activist who spoke very interestingly and answered some really interesting solid questions. There was Paul Elam, who is a fairly notorious men's rights activist, or MRA, and he founded the website A Voice for Men, which is and was one of Cassie J's main contributors. Cassie J, the filmmaker, was there, and she had some really interesting things to say. It was nice to have the opportunity to talk to her and to find out a bit more about her drives and her motivations. And you know, ultimately she just wanted to make a film that challenged people's perceptions about what was going on, because things weren't quite exactly as she thought they were. And it's really interesting to hear how she got into feminism and then from that into this. There were that Erin Prezi was one of the panellists as well, and she founded one of the first she founded the first domestic abuse refuges in the UK, and she was absolutely vilified and persecuted by feminists in the 1970s when she did this, because she was quite right in asserting that men are victims of domestic abuse, and as well as women can be violent. For me, having worked in this area for quite a while, this doesn't come as a surprise. The first story I was ever told about sexual violence was actually about 4 women attacking a man. So I've never, like, at the age I was told, I didn't really understand it, but I've always understood that women and men are both capable of committing horrific acts against one another. And one of the things that came up for me as quite a danger area is that not enough feminists seem to be accepting that. Not enough women seem to be accepting that. And so when men are looking for allies, they would expect, survivors are looking for allies, they would expect women who have also experienced sexual abuse to probably be their ally, and it feels for them like they're not. One of the words that I learnt, and I thought I knew a lot of words, but I learnt a whole new one, which is gynocentricity, or gynocentric. I have a lot of problems with this word. It's essentially the idea that we live in a society that protects women over men, that actually men are oppressed through the legal system, through the justice system, through society and through education, because men's sentencing tends to be harsher, because more men die in combat, in wars, because the family court system tends to be weighted against men. These are the main premises of the men's rights movement. And there's also issues to do with genital mutilation, male genital mutilation, so circumcision, that are brought up in the film. And I think one of the audience members who feels very passionately about this subject identified that there was only less than a minute given over to this issue. But for me, it's one of the most vivid, visceral moments of the film, and it really, really shocked me. Like watching a young boy be circumcised as a medical procedure was, you know, very, very interesting and shocking. I believe that gynocentricity, the concept of it, comes from a misunderstanding of why some of our cultural practices have come about historically, and that yes, women have been protected in wars, it's been the women and children first thing, and that's come because, not because women are in control or women are thought more of, but you know, the need to continue, our job is to continue the human race, and we are protected for our uteruses and their use, rather than the fact that we are women and we are in control. That said, one of the most horrific facts that does come up in the movie is the slaughter of hundreds of Nigerian boys when the Boko Haram took all of the girls. They killed all of the boys in that college. And this is one of those facts of war. Men have been brought up to be the fighters. And the fact that we didn't hear about that in the Western media. And this is what gives fuel to the fire that women's lives in this gynocentric world, women's lives are more important. And I think for me that simply isn't true. There's a lot of things packed into that one thing, and for me there are a lot of things in this movie, a lot of the issues that men are facing that are complex things. They are symptomatic. Certain men's feelings of disenfranchisement from the system, on the face of it, could look like women are ruling the world and ruining their lives, but when you look a bit deeper, there are all sorts of socio and economic things that are happening. Like, more men are on the streets in both America and Britain, but isn't that because we don't have enough money within our system to provide enough welfare and support to those people? More men are committing suicide in Britain, certainly, and I think it's the same in America, and that's where the statistics are coming from. But in Britain, certainly, more men are committing suicide than women. My suggestions to the other members of the panel that maybe we needed to encourage men to be able to express their feelings in whatever way works was met with quite a lot of resistance, particularly by one of the other panellists, Mike Buchanan, who is a politician. He is the founder of Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them, in small brackets underneath the big Justice for Men and Boys. He used to be a Tory MP. I haven't done a lot of research into his history. I have done some reading into his thoughts, but there is an article that says that he left the Conservative Party after feeling frustrated with David Cameron's insistence that women should be encouraged towards STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering and mathematics, because, and the quote is, whether it's true or not, the quote is that, well, they haven't shown any interest in it before, which isn't technically true. When men went to war in the Second World War, the women went to the munitions factories. There were women working, there have been women working behind the scenes in science forever. I was listening to something on Radio 4 about the first computers, the first people who were computers were women, and they were women that were supporting astrologists, not astrologists, astronomists, I always confuse those two things, like mapping the stars, working out the actual calculations for where the stars were. There have been women behind men and beside men throughout many of the major discoveries in history, but it's not considered the obvious choice for women a lot of the time. One of the things I found interesting was that Mike Buchanan was the only person on the panel to continually interrupt the feminist speakers. It was myself, Case, John Went and Jess, and I feel very bad I can't remember Jess's surname, but she's studying gender studies at PhD level at Anglia Ruskin University, and was speaking very, very articulately on the topics that she was questioned about, and she was interrupted by Mike. And you know, Mike feels that we need better role models in our society for men, which I agree with, actually. But I think somebody that has lying feminist of the month, toxic feminist of the month, whiny feminist of the month on their political party website maybe isn't the best example of a man I can think of, as in, you know, holding them up to men. Maybe not the best advocate to be taken wholly seriously. Simply because I think of it as a teacher. I'm a teacher, and if I had whiny student of the week, toxic student of the week, lying student of the week, I would be sacked because it's not considered appropriate or healthy or useful. Yet this is the way Mr. Buchanan seems to want to take his party. And I do think that if there are men out there, and there clearly are men out there who feel that they are not represented within our society, then I'm really sad that this is the person that they have representing them at any level. He was a great disappointment to me, like speaking with a politician, it was a great disappointment to me. Finally, the biggest thing that I took from the 2 evenings that I was a panellist and watching the film twice is that there has been, in the West at least, historically, we have ignored the danger signs. We ignored it with the First World War, we ignored it with the Second World War. We've ignored danger signs where, down to individual cases where, you know, young people have been the victims of terrible abuses that the system has seen but not recognised. And when I talk to people of different colours and backgrounds who are certainly statistically, scientifically oppressed by the system, one of the biggest comments is, well, I saw Whoopi Goldberg say this on a clip from The View, this is why black people don't want to talk to white people, because they have to justify their oppression, they have to justify that they are being oppressed and that this is their feeling. Why can't their feeling be considered truth? Because feelings are quite good indicators if we look at them rationally. And actually, if there are people who are feeling oppressed, we need to deconstruct that, because it's when we ignore things like the people that tried to shut down this movie from three separate venues, shutting down this argument, shutting down these people's feelings of frustration and oppression is only going to feed that fire. The one thing that I would say about Cassie J is she has tried to stimulate a conversation, and that is a conversation that many people in the men's rights movement seem to want to have on some level, which is great. The job is now for everybody else to come to the table and listen to what the problems are and see if these are individual problems that need support, or see if these are wider societal issues that need policy changes. Sadly, I seem to be very much on the fence and believe listening at least to everybody and forming opinions based on research and fact is probably the best way to go. There are some horrific examples of feminism in this movie. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for now. Any questions? Drop me a link in the comments.